A Mafia prince disguised as a billionaire CEO finds a sleeping student who mirrors a ghost from his past. One frozen moment that awakens what he thought he'd buried forever. She is a brilliant but exhausted scholarship student, fighting to stay invisible while juggling impossible expectations. He is a man who exists in two worlds, a polished CEO by day and a ruthless Mafia heir by night. A man who has perfected control over everything except his own haunted heart. Their paths should never cross, separated by wealth, danger, and the chasm between innocence and violence. But a single lecture hall becomes the stage where obsession, deception, and a love that died years ago collide. As Ryu Suk's carefully constructed walls begin to crack and Zaraya becomes the target she never asked to be, both will discover that some connections can't be escaped, even when survival demands it. Welcome to the channel. You're about to hear a story that reminds us why love, patience, and hope still matter. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share the story with someone who needs hope today. Your support helps these stories reach hearts that truly need them. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And now, let's go straight into the story. The morning the university announced Professor Nakamura's sudden sabbatical, Zaraya Jones barely looked up from her coffee. Faculty drama didn't pay her tuition. She had 3 shifts at the campus bookstore this week, 2 problem sets due Friday, and exactly $47 in her checking account until next month's scholarship deposit. The fact that advanced strategic mathematics now had a substitute professor was just another line item in a semester already drowning her. She didn't notice the whispers that started in the hallway outside the lecture hall. Didn't see the way her classmates arrived 15 minutes early, phones out, makeup hastily reapplied. Zaraya slid into her usual seat in the front row, not out of ambition, but because it was the only place she could stay awake under the fluorescent lights, and pulled out her battered notebook, already calculating how many pages she could survive before her pen died. Then the door opened, and the room fell silent in a way that made her skin prickle. Ryu Suk entered like he was walking onto a stage he'd purchased. Tall, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire year's tuition, with a face that belonged on magazine covers and eyes that belonged nowhere near a university classroom. He moved with the kind of confidence that didn't ask for attention. It assumed ownership of every gaze in the room. "Good morning." His voice was smooth, controlled, each syllable perfectly measured. "I'm Professor Ryu. I'll be guiding this course for the foreseeable future." Zaraya's pen paused mid-word. Something about his voice made her pulse stumble, though she couldn't say why. She forced her attention back to her notebook, writing the date with deliberate focus. She had no space in her life for attractive professors or the complications they represented. "Strategic mathematics," Ryu Suk continued, his footsteps clicking against the floor as he moved toward the front, "is not about numbers. It's about patterns, prediction, understanding what moves someone will make before they know themselves." He stopped directly in front of Zaraya's desk. She felt his shadow fall across her notebook before she looked up. Their eyes met for precisely 3 seconds. In that moment, Zaraya saw something flicker behind his carefully blank expression. Recognition, maybe, or surprise, or something darker she couldn't name. Then it vanished, replaced by professional distance. "You are?" he asked, his tone conversational but somehow pointed. "Zaraya Jones." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Ms. Jones." He said her name like he was testing its weight. "Front row. Interesting choice." Then he moved on, and Zaraya released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The lecture was brilliant. Zaraya hated that she noticed, hated that despite her exhaustion and her 3 jobs and her determination to remain invisible, she found herself leaning forward, following his explanations of game theory and strategic modeling with an attention she usually reserved for scholarship requirements. Ryu Suk taught like a man who'd spent his life reading opponents, predicting outcomes, staying 3 moves ahead of everyone around him. When class ended, he dismissed everyone with a casual wave, except he didn't move from his position near the door. Zaraya felt his eyes tracking her as she gathered her things, felt the weight of his attention like a physical touch. She forced herself to walk normally, to not rush, to pretend she didn't notice the way he watched her leave. What she didn't see was Ryu Suk returning to the empty classroom, pulling out his phone, and making a single call. "I need complete access to the student record system." full academic history, schedule, work-study assignments, scholarship status. Everything. A pause. Zariah Jones. Priority 1. He ended the call and stood in the silent lecture hall, his reflection ghost-like in the darkened windows. After 2 years and 6 months of searching through shadows and half-remembered faces, he'd found her again. Or found someone who could be her. Someone who made his carefully controlled heart remember what it felt like to beat for something other than revenge and empire. This time, he wouldn't let her disappear. This time, he'd make sure she never had the chance to leave. The email arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, when Zariah was 3 hours into a shift at the campus bookstore and running on her second energy drink of the night. Subject: academic concern, immediate response required. Asterisk Ms. Jones, your attendance record shows concerning gaps in your academic responsibilities. Please see me in my office tomorrow at 4 p.m. to discuss remediation options. This is not optional. Asterisk. Professor Ryu. Zariah read it twice, her stomach dropping. Attendance gaps? She hadn't missed a single class. Couldn't afford to, not with her scholarship hanging by a thread. She typed back immediately, fingers shaking slightly from caffeine and confusion, explaining that there must be some mistake, that she'd been present for every lecture. His response came within minutes, as if he'd been waiting. Asterisk my office. 4 p.m. We'll review the evidence together. Asterisk. She barely slept that night. The next afternoon, Zariah climbed 3 flights of stairs to the faculty wing, her backpack heavy with textbooks she couldn't afford to replace if she lost her scholarship. Professor Ryu's office was at the end of a quiet hallway, the door slightly ajar. She knocked softly. Come in, Ms. Jones. The office was too elegant for a temporary professor. Leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a view of the campus that suggested this was a space reserved for donors or board members, not substitute faculty. Ryu Suk sat behind an imposing desk, his suit jacket draped over his chair, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows in a way that shouldn't have been distracting but somehow was. Sit, he said, not looking up from his tablet. Zariah sat, gripping the strap of her backpack. Professor Ryu, I think there's been a mistake. I haven't missed any. Haven't you? He turned the tablet toward her, and her words died in her throat. The video was grainy but unmistakable. Zariah herself, slipping out of the lecture hall 20 minutes into class last Thursday. She watched her own figure disappear down the hallway, clearly abandoning the session. Except she hadn't. She'd been there the entire time. She remembered that lecture, remembered taking notes on Nash equilibrium, remembered the way Professor Ryu had used a chess metaphor that had finally made the concept click. That's not, she started, but he cut her off. Not what, Ms. Jones? Not you. The timestamp is clear. The security footage doesn't lie. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. You're a scholarship student. I imagine the administration would be very interested to know you're treating your education so cavalierly. Panic bloomed in her chest. I was there. I swear I was there. I don't know what that video shows, but... What it shows, he interrupted, his voice soft and dangerous, is a student who needs additional oversight. Fortunately, I'm prepared to offer a solution. He slid a paper across the desk. Zariah picked it up with numb fingers. Asterisk private tutoring agreement. Sessions to be held at Professor Ryu's residence, twice weekly, duration to be determined based on academic progress. Asterisk. Your residence. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. I have resources there that the university can't provide. A proper study environment. Materials that would benefit someone in your precarious position. He steepled his fingers, watching her with the intensity of a predator that had just cornered its prey. Consider it an opportunity, Ms. Jones. Many students would be grateful for such personalized attention. And if I refuse? His smile was cold, perfect, utterly without warmth. Then I submit my concerns to the scholarship committee, along with the security footage. I imagine they'll want to conduct their own investigation. These things can take months to resolve. Scholarships are often suspended during ongoing reviews. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thinner. Zariah looked down at the paper, at the address printed at the bottom. Some estate in the hills outside the city, far from campus, far from anywhere she could call for help if she needed it. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered. "Why would you?" Tuesday and Thursday evenings, starting this week. 7 p.m. sharp. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. "I'll send a car for you. Don't be late, Ms. Jones. I'm not a patient man." Zariah walked out of his office in a daze, the paper crumpled in her fist, trying to understand how her life had just been hijacked by a man she'd known for less than 2 weeks. Trying to ignore the part of her brain that whispered she'd just walked into a trap that had been set the moment she'd opened her eyes in his classroom and found him watching her like he'd been searching for her his entire life. Wait, before I continue. Hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this next part is insane. The invitation appeared in Zariah's campus mailbox on a Friday morning, nestled between a past-due library notice and a flyer for cheap pizza. Heavy cardstock, the kind that whispered money before you even opened the envelope. Zariah almost threw it away. She didn't get invitations to anything except past-due payment reminders. But curiosity won. Asterisk, you have been selected as one of 50 university students to attend the exclusive Lotus and Jade Spring Collection preview. Transportation, attire, and refreshments provided. This is a unique networking opportunity for emerging scholars. Saturday, 7 p.m. RSVP required. Asterisk. Zariah read it 3 times, looking for the catch. Luxury fashion brands didn't invite broke scholarship students to preview events. They especially didn't offer to provide attire, which suggested they knew exactly how broke those scholarship students were. Her roommate Nia squealed when she saw it. "Are you kidding? Lotus and Jade. Do you know what their dresses cost? This is insane. You have to go. It's probably a scam. It's campus mail, Z. What are they gonna do? Kidnap you from the university postal system?" Nia grabbed her laptop, already pulling up the brand's website. "Oh my God, look at this. Their last show had Kendall Jenner in the front row. This is legitimate." Zariah stared at the invitation, unease prickling at the base of her skull. She'd received exactly one piece of unexpected good fortune in her life, her scholarship, and even that felt like it was held together with tape and prayer. Things like this didn't happen to girls like her. But she RSVP'd anyway, because Nia was right about one thing. Opportunities didn't knock twice, even suspicious ones. The car that arrived on Saturday evening was excessive. A sleek black sedan with a driver in a suit who opened her door like she was someone important. The provided attire turned out to be a midnight blue dress that fit perfectly. Alterations clearly made to measurements Zariah had never given anyone. The fabric moved like water, and when she checked the label, her breath had caught. The dress alone was worth more than 3 months of her rent. The venue was a converted warehouse in the Arts District, all exposed brick and dramatic lighting, filled with the kind of beautiful people who looked like they'd been curated rather than invited. Zariah accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, more to have something to hold than to drink, and tried not to feel like an imposter. "You came." She turned, and there he was. Ryu Suk, in a black suit that made his lecture attire look casual, his dark hair styled back, every inch the billionaire he'd clearly always been beneath the professor veneer. He looked at her the way a collector might look at a painting he'd just acquired. "Professor Ryu." Her voice came out shakier than she wanted. "What are you?" Ryu Suk is fine outside of class. He took her champagne glass, replacing it with a flute from his own hand, something about the gesture both intimate and possessive. "You look stunning. The dress suits you." "How did you know?" She stopped, pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. The perfect measurements. The invitation that had appeared right after their first tutoring session at his estate. "You sent this." "I suggested the university partnership, yes. Lotus and Jade believes in investing in future leaders." His expression remained neutral, but something gleamed in his eyes. Satisfaction, maybe, or the pleasure of a chess player watching his opponent realize they were already in check. "It seemed appropriate to include you. Lotus and Jade believes, or you believe." His smile was slight, dangerous. "Is there a difference?" The room seemed to tilt slightly. Zariah looked around at the glittering crowd, at the models drifting past in clothes that cost more than her education, at the massive logo suspended from the ceiling. You own this. You own all of this. I own many things, Ms. Jones. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtly threatening. I find it's easier to ensure quality when you control the entire operation. Why? The word came out barely above a whisper. Why would you do this? Because you work 3 jobs to afford textbooks. Because you fall asleep in libraries trying to maintain impossible standards. His hand rose, and for a moment she thought he might touch her face, but he simply adjusted the thin strap of her dress with clinical precision. Because I can give you everything you're killing yourself trying to earn, and all you have to do is stop fighting me. That's not, she stepped back, her heel catching slightly. This isn't tutoring. This is something else. Yes, he agreed simply. It is. Around them, beautiful people laughed and posed and sipped champagne, completely unaware that in the center of the glittering room, a trap had just finished closing. Zariah stood in her perfect dress, surrounded by luxury she hadn't earned and couldn't escape, and finally understood that Professor Ryu's interest in her academic performance had never been academic at all. Enjoy the evening, Ms. Jones, Ryu Suk said softly, already turning away. The car will take you home whenever you're ready. Though I hope you'll stay. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving her alone with champagne and couture and the dawning realization that she'd been carefully, methodically purchased, one gift at a time. Pause. Subscribe real quick. And drop your country in the comments. You need to witness what happens next. The whispers started in the bathroom between second and third period. Zariah was washing her hands when 2 girls from her statistics class walked in, voices low and conspiratorial, not noticing her in the far stall. I'm telling you, he made her stay after class again. 3rd time this week. For what? She's not even failing. Sarah checked. Zariah has like a 3.8 GPA. That's what makes it weird. Why is Professor Ryu so obsessed with her academics if she's already doing fine? The water shut off. Zariah stood frozen, hands dripping as the girls continued. Maybe she's not doing fine in other ways, one of them said, voice dripping with implication. They left laughing, and Zariah stared at her reflection in the mirror, watching water droplets fall from her fingers like evidence of something she couldn't wash away. By Wednesday, the rumors had evolved into a campus-wide spectator sport. Professor Ryu called on her 7 times during lecture. 7, when most students went entire semesters without being acknowledged. He'd paused beside her desk to correct her notation, his hand hovering close enough to her shoulder that everyone in the back rows had pulled out their phones. When Marcus Chen made a joke about game theory and dating, the whole class had laughed except for Ryu Suk, whose expression had gone cold enough to freeze the room into uncomfortable silence. Mr. Chen, I don't recall asking for commentary on your personal failures. Perhaps focus that energy on the problem set instead. The pettiness was surgical, precise, and completely out of proportion. Marcus had slumped in his seat, and Zariah had felt every eye in the room turn toward her, calculating, judging, connecting dots that drew a picture she desperately didn't want to see. At lunch, she sat alone in the library, but that didn't stop her phone from buzzing with screenshots from the campus gossip forum. Guest Professor Ryu really said personal failures in front of 200 people just BC someone made a joke near Zariah Jones' LMAO. Asterisk, why is he so protective of her though? Eyes asterisk. Heard he bought out an entire fashion show just to get her invited. Asterisk, okay, but can we talk about how he literally stops lecturing when she looks tired? Like, sir, that's not normal professor behavior, asterisk. Zariah deleted the app, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Thursday's tutoring session at his estate was worse than usual, tension crackling between them like a live wire. Zariah had arrived angry, prepared to confront him about the spectacle he was making of her life, but Ryu Suk had simply handed her a cup of tea and opened her textbook as if nothing was wrong. You're distracted, he said after she'd gotten the same problem wrong twice. What's bothering you? What's bothering me? She slammed her pencil down. You humiliated Marcus in front of everyone. You call on me so much people are starting to think I'm, she stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Starting to think you're what? His voice was dangerously soft. That something's going on. That I'm getting special treatment. That I'm, the words stuck in her throat. Sleeping with me. He said it casually, like he was discussing the weather. Is that what they're saying? Her silence was answer enough. Ryu Suk leaned back in his chair, studying her with those unreadable dark eyes. And does it matter what they say? Of course it matters. My scholarship, my reputation. Your scholarship is untouchable. I've made certain of that. He stood, moving to the window overlooking his perfectly manicured grounds. As for your reputation, let them talk. People will always create stories to explain what they don't understand. And what don't they understand? Zariah demanded, standing too, her hands shaking with frustration. Because I don't understand either. Why do you care if someone makes a joke near me? Why do you watch me like I'm going to disappear if you look away? He turned slowly, and for the first time since she'd met him, something cracked in his carefully controlled expression. Something raw and haunted flickered across his face before he locked it away. Because you did disappear once, he said quietly. And I've spent 2 years and 6 months making sure it never happens again. The words hung in the air between them, confession and threat wrapped into one. Zariah stared at him, her anger draining away into something more complicated, more terrifying. What are you talking about? I've never met you before this semester. Haven't you? His smile was sad, bitter, entirely without joy. Or maybe you just don't remember. Maybe I'm not worth remembering. He walked past her toward his study, dismissing her without another word, leaving Zariah alone in his expensive house with questions multiplying like ghosts and the sickening realization that whatever obsession drove Professor Ryu, it had started long before she'd ever fallen asleep in his classroom. Outside, her phone buzzed with another notification. Another rumor. Another piece of speculation about the lucky scholarship student who'd somehow captured the attention of the coldest man on campus. Lucky, they called her. Zariah had never felt less lucky in her life. Stop scrolling. Subscribe right now and tell me where you're watching from. Because the twist that's coming? You won't believe it. The sketchbook fell out of Zariah's backpack during their Tuesday tutoring session, landing face up on Ryu Suk's marble floor with a soft thud that somehow echoed louder than it should have. Zariah was at the whiteboard, working through a probability matrix, completely absorbed in the numbers. She didn't see Ryu Suk bend to retrieve it. Didn't see his hand freeze halfway to the worn cover, or the way his breath caught when he recognized the water-stained edges, the duct tape holding the spine together. He picked it up carefully, like it might disintegrate under his fingers. The first page was dated 8 years ago, the handwriting younger, rounder, but unmistakably hers. Sketches of street corners and convenience stores, quick pencil studies of neighborhoods that Ryu Suk recognized with the kind of visceral clarity that made his chest tighten. Maple Street. The abandoned church on 5th. The corner store with the faded Coca-Cola sign that had been torn down 6 years ago. His first love had lived 3 blocks from that church. Professor Ryu. Did I get the equation wrong? He closed the sketchbook quickly, but not before seeing the next page. A sketch of the high school, the one they'd both attended, rendered in careful detail. The oak tree in the courtyard where he'd kissed Min-ji for the first time. The bleachers where she'd told him she was sick, that the doctors weren't optimistic, that she was scared. No, he managed, his voice steadier than his hands. The equation is fine. Take a break. Zariah turned, confused, and that's when she noticed her sketchbook in his hands. Her expression shifted immediately. Not quite panic, but something close. Something protective. That's private, she said, moving toward him. You grew up in Riverside. It wasn't a question. Ryu Suk held the sketchbook like evidence, like proof of something he couldn't quite name yet. These streets. I know them. Lots of people grew up in Riverside. It's not exactly exclusive real estate. She reached for the sketchbook, but he stepped back, still staring at the pages like they contained answers to questions he'd been asking for years. What school did you go to? Why does it matter? Her voice was sharp now. defensive in a way that made his suspicions multiply. "Give it back." "Lincoln High," he said, watching her face carefully. "You went to Lincoln High." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or memory, or fear. "For 2 years. Then my mom got a job in California and we moved. I finished high school there." "When did you leave?" "I don't," she stopped, studying him with growing unease. "Spring of junior year. March, I think." "What is this? Why are you?" "March." Minji had died in April. 1 month after Zariah had left. Ryu Suk's mind was racing, connecting dots that had been scattered across 8 years, across 2 cities, across the distance between a dead girl and a living one who somehow carried pieces of her in the way she moved, the way she smiled when she thought no one was watching. "Did you know a girl named Park Minji?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. Zariah went very still. "Minji. The girl who—" She stopped, her expression shifting into something sad and distant. "She died. Cancer. It was all over school, even in California. Some of my old friends posted about it." "Did you know her?" He pressed, moving closer. "Not really. She was a year ahead of me, I think. We had art class together once." Zariah's brow furrowed, remembering. "She was kind. She complimented my drawings. Why are you asking me about a girl who died 8 years ago?" "Because you sketch like her. Because you bite your lip when you're concentrating like she did. Because you fell asleep in my classroom wearing a pink cap and for 3 seconds I thought I'd traveled back in time to a world where she never got sick, never left me, never made me promise to find happiness after she was gone." But he couldn't say any of that. Couldn't explain that he'd been searching for ghosts in every face he passed, that he'd seen Zariah in his lecture hall and his heart had stopped because for one impossible moment, he'd thought Minji had come back. "You remind me of someone," he said instead, his voice barely above a whisper. "The girl who died." "Yes." Zariah stared at him, understanding dawning in her eyes along with something else. Horror, maybe, or pity, or the terrible realization that she'd never been herself in his eyes. That every moment of his attention, every gift, every obsessive gesture had been aimed not at her but at the ghost she resembled. "Is that why you—" She gestured helplessly around his estate, at the tutoring sessions and the invitations and the manufactured control over her life. "All of this. It's because I look like her." "No," Ryu Suk said, but the lie tasted wrong even as he spoke it. "You're not her. You're a replacement," Zariah finished, her voice hollow. "I'm a replacement for someone you couldn't save." She grabbed the sketchbook from his hands and walked out of his study, out of his house, ignoring his calls behind her. The door closed with a finality that echoed through empty rooms. Ryu Suk stood alone, surrounded by his wealth and his carefully constructed life, and for the first time since Minji's funeral, he let himself acknowledge the truth he'd been running from. He didn't know if he loved Zariah for who she was, or if he was just desperate enough to love her for who she wasn't. Hold up, subscribe first. Then comment your location. Now brace yourself. This story is about to explode. Zariah noticed the new transfer student on a Thursday, sitting 3 rows behind her in advanced strategic mathematics. Tall, clean-cut, the kind of attractive that seemed manufactured rather than natural. He took notes with mechanical precision but never asked questions, and when class ended, he left exactly 45 seconds after she did. She saw him again at the library that evening, then at the campus coffee shop on Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, when he appeared in the bookstore during her shift, coincidence had curdled into certainty. She confronted Ryu Suk after their next tutoring session, standing in his doorway with her arms crossed and her backpack slung over one shoulder, ready to bolt. "Call off your watchdog." He didn't even pretend confusion. "You noticed Daniel. He's getting sloppy. I'll speak to him." "You'll speak to," Zariah's voice rose. "You admit you have someone following me?" Following is such an unpleasant word. Ryu Suk set down his pen with deliberate calm. "I prefer monitoring. For your safety." "My safety from what? Pop quizzes? Overdue library books?" His expression darkened. "From people who've noticed my interest in you. From individuals who might see you as leverage, as a weakness they can exploit. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications Zariah didn't want to unpack. What kind of professor has enemies who take hostages? The kind who isn't really a professor, he said quietly. Zariah's stomach dropped. She'd suspected, of course, the wealth, the control, the way he moved through the world like someone accustomed to owning it. But hearing him confirm it was different. Worse. Then what are you? Someone who's made powerful enemies in powerful places. Someone whose attention has now painted a target on your back whether you want it or not. He stood, moving toward her with that predatory grace that always made her want to flee. 3 days ago, someone took photographs of you leaving my estate. Yesterday, those photographs appeared in a private forum used by individuals who would very much like to hurt me. Then stop, Zariah said, hating how her voice shook. Stop tutoring me. Stop calling on me. Stop making me visible. It's too late for that. His hand rose to her face, and this time she didn't pull away, too frozen by the intensity in his eyes. They've already seen you. Already marked you as mine. The only question now is whether you're protected or exposed. So I'm in danger because of you, and your solution is to control me even more? My solution is to keep you alive. The words should have sounded dramatic, paranoid even, but something in his voice made them land like truth. Zariah thought of the fabricated video, the tutoring sessions, the fashion show, all the ways he'd been weaving a cage around her that she'd mistaken for gifts. How many? She asked finally. How many people are watching me? 4 in rotation. Daniel is primary during class hours. Maya covers evenings. They're trained, professional, invisible unless they need not to be. Trained in what? His silence was answer enough. Zariah laughed, the sound bitter and slightly hysterical. This is insane. I'm a scholarship student. I work at a bookstore. I'm nobody. You're somebody to me, Ryusuk said, and the raw honesty in his voice was somehow worse than any lie. Which makes you somebody to them. She should have left then. Should have run to campus security, to the administration, to anyone who might help her escape whatever dark world Ryusuk had dragged her into. But a treacherous part of her mind was calculating. The fabricated video he still held over her scholarship, the enemies he'd just revealed who'd already taken her photograph, the way every exit seemed to lead back to him. I want to meet them, she said. You're bodyguards. If they're going to follow me, I should at least know their faces. Something like respect flickered in his expression. Tomorrow. I'll arrange it. And I want the truth. About who you really are. About what danger you think I'm in. She stepped closer, meeting his gaze with a boldness she didn't quite feel. No more games. No more manipulation. If you're going to trap me, at least have the decency to tell me what cage I'm in. Ryusuk studied her for a long moment, and Zariah watched emotions flicker across his face too quickly to name. Desire, regret, something that might have been pride or might have been grief. Saturday, he said finally. I'll tell you everything. But once you know Zariah, you can't unknow it. You can't go back to being the girl who fell asleep in my classroom and woke up to find her life had changed. My life already changed, she said, shouldering her backpack. You made sure of that the moment you decided I looked enough like your dead girlfriend to be worth saving. She left before he could respond, but she felt his gaze follow her all the way to the car where Daniel waited, professional and blank-faced, to drive her home to an apartment that no longer felt like sanctuary, just another room in a prison she was only beginning to understand. Before I show you the craziest part, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from. This is about to get wild. The campus ambassador nomination appeared in Zariah's student portal on a Monday morning, and her first reaction was to check if she'd logged into the wrong account. Asterisk, congratulations. You've been nominated for University Campus Ambassador. This prestigious position offers a $10,000 annual stipend, priority course registration, and represents our institution at major events. Voting opens Wednesday. Asterisk. Zariah hadn't applied. Hadn't even known the position existed. She deleted the notification, assuming it was a system error, and promptly forgot about it. The campus didn't let her forget. By Tuesday, professionally designed posters with her face appeared on every building. Zaraya smiling in a photograph she didn't remember taking, looking confident and accomplished in clothes she'd never owned. The tagline read, "Leadership through resilience. Vote Zaraya Jones." "This is incredible," Nia squealed, dragging her to the student union where a massive banner hung across the entrance. "Do you know what this could mean? $10,000. Z. You could quit the bookstore. Focus on school. I didn't apply for this." Zaraya stared at her own face replicated dozens of times across campus, each poster more elaborate than the last. "Someone nominated me without asking." "Who cares? You're going to win. Look at this production value." Nia pulled up the campaign website on her phone, a sleek, professional page with testimonials from Professor Zaraya had never spoken to. Community leaders praising her leadership potential, even a video montage of her studying in the library set to inspiring music. The video had been edited by professionals. The testimonials were clearly coached. And the website domain had been registered 3 months ago, long before nominations opened. Zaraya felt sick. Wednesday brought the debate, mandatory for all 5 candidates, held in the main auditorium. Zaraya arrived in jeans and her bookstore polo, the only professional clothes she owned, and found herself facing 4 other students dressed in business attire, each clutching prepared speeches and statistics. She had nothing. Hadn't prepared. Didn't even want to be there. Then she saw him in the back row. Ryu Suk, sitting alone in a sea of empty seats, watching her with an expression that might have been encouragement or might have been ownership. The moderator called her name. Zaraya walked to the podium on autopilot, every eye in the auditorium fixed on her, and the words that came out surprised even herself. "I don't know why I'm here," she said, her voice echoing through the sound system. "I didn't apply for this. I didn't ask for these posters or this website or any of this. Someone decided I should be campus ambassador without asking if I wanted it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The other candidates exchanged glances, smelling blood. "But I do know what it's like to work 3 jobs while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. I know what it's like to choose between textbooks and groceries. I know that most of the students here aren't thinking about prestigious positions. They're thinking about survival." She gripped the podium, her knuckles white. "So if you vote for me, know that I'll use this platform to fight for students like me. Not because I want recognition, but because nobody else seems to be paying attention." She walked off the stage to thunderous applause, shaking, her heart racing, and she didn't look at Ryu Suk as she pushed through the auditorium doors into the cold afternoon air. He found her 20 minutes later, sitting on a bench behind the library, trying to process what had just happened. "That was remarkable," he said, sitting beside her uninvited. "Honest. Powerful. Exactly what they needed to hear. You did this. It wasn't a question. The nomination. The posters. All of it. I may have made some calls. Suggested your name to the right people." "Why?" She turned to face him, searching his expression for something that made sense. Why spend what must be hundreds of thousands of dollars on a campus election? Ryu Suk was quiet for a long moment, studying the bare trees across the quad. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Because in that auditorium, when you were talking about fighting for students like you smiled. Just for a second, talking about something you believed in." He looked at her then, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. "I realized I'd never seen you actually smile before. Not in my classroom, not at my estate, not at the fashion show. Just stress and exhaustion and fear." "So you bought me an election to make me happy?" "I bought you an election to remind you what it feels like to fight for something instead of just surviving." He stood, straightening his jacket. "The money doesn't matter, Zaraya. It never has. But watching you find something worth fighting for, that matters more than you know." The results came in Friday. Zaraya won by a landslide, 82% of the vote, the highest margin in university history. The stipend hit her account the following week, and for the first time in 3 years, she paid rent without calculating which meals she could skip. But every time she looked at her bank balance, she thought of Ryu Suk sitting alone in that auditorium, spending millions just to see her smile, and she couldn't decide if she'd been given a gift or if she'd just been purchased in the most elaborate way possible. Subscribe real quick, tell me where you're watching from, and get ready, because the next 5 seconds will shock you. The invitation to the Crimson Gala came with the campus ambassador position, delivered in the same heavy cardstock that had started this entire nightmare. A charity fundraiser at the Belmont Grand Hotel, black tie required, attendance strongly encouraged for university representatives. Zoraya almost didn't go, but the stipend had been deposited, and Nia had already ordered her a dress. Deep burgundy silk that made her feel like someone else entirely, and some masochistic part of her needed to see how deep Ryu Suk's world really went. The ballroom was excessive wealth made physical. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, champagne towers that probably cost more than her first car. Zoraya recognized tech CEOs and city councilors, faces from Forbes covers mingling with old money in pearls and diamonds. She accepted a glass of wine and tried to look like she belonged. She didn't see Ryu Suk until the speeches started. He stood at the front of the room in a tuxedo that transformed him from dangerous to devastating, speaking about philanthropic initiatives and community investment with the ease of someone who'd bought and sold companies before breakfast. But it was the way people watched him that made Zoraya's skin prickle, not with admiration, but with fear barely concealed beneath polite smiles. Then she noticed the men at the edges of the room. 4 of them, spread across different exits, wearing earpieces and watching the crowd with predatory focus. Not hotel security. Something else. Quite the performance, isn't it? Zoraya turned to find a woman beside her, elegant and sharp-edged, sipping scotch with manicured nails painted blood red. I'm sorry. Ryu Suk. Playing the respectable billionaire. The woman's smile was cold. You must be the girl. The one he's been parading around campus like a trophy. I don't know what you... Oh please. Everyone in this room knows who you are. Zoraya Jones, the scholarship student who caught the dragon's attention. She leaned closer, her perfume expensive and suffocating. Did he tell you what he does when the cameras aren't rolling? What business really funds all this charity? Before Zoraya could respond, one of the men with earpieces appeared at the woman's elbow. Ms. Chen. Mr. Ryu would like a word. Privately. The woman's smile faltered. Tell him I'm socializing. It wasn't a request. Something passed across her face. Calculation, then resignation, then fear. She set down her glass and followed the man toward a side door, heels clicking against marble like a countdown. Zoraya's pulse quickened. She shouldn't follow. Should stay in the ballroom with the champagne and the polite lies. But her feet were already moving, keeping distance, watching as the woman and 2 escorts disappeared into a private corridor. The hallway was quieter, the gala's noise fading to a distant murmur. Zoraya crept forward, her heart hammering, until she heard voices behind a partially open door. You've been moving product through my territory. Ryu Suk's voice was unrecognizable, devoid of the professor's measured tone, stripped down to something cold and absolute. Did you think I wouldn't notice? It was a misunderstanding, a routing error. Don't insult me with excuses, Vivian. The sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate. You've been shorting my percentages for 6 months, testing boundaries, seeing how much you could steal before I responded. Ryu, please. You have 48 hours to return what you've taken, plus 20% interest. If I don't receive full payment, your distribution network disappears. Your suppliers disappear. And you. His pause was weighted with threat. You'll wish you'd disappeared. Silence, then the woman's voice shaking. You can't do this. My family. Your family will receive your condolences and move on. Business is business, Vivian. You know the rules. Zoraya stepped back, her hand over her mouth, as the door opened fully. The woman stumbled out, mascara streaked, flanked by the 2 men who'd been at her elbow earlier. She didn't look at Zoraya as she passed, too focused on simply breathing. Then Ryu Suk emerged, adjusting his cufflinks with clinical precision, and his eyes locked on Zoraya. For 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. How much did you hear? His voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. Enough. The word came out strangled. You're not a professor. You're not even just a billionaire. No, he agreed, walking toward her with that same unhurried confidence he'd used to approach her desk that first day. I'm not. You're a... She couldn't say it, couldn't make it real. A businessman with diversified interests, he finished. Though the term you're looking for is probably something cruder. More violent. Mafia boss. Crime lord. The dragon that woman had called him. Zaraya's back hit the wall. The bodyguards. The enemies who took my photograph. You weren't exaggerating. I never exaggerate about danger. He stopped a foot away, close enough to touch but not touching, giving her space that felt like mockery. I tried to keep you separate from this world. Give you the pretty parts, the dresses, the galas, the election, while handling the ugly parts myself. By threatening to make people disappear? By protecting what's mine. His hand rose to her face, and this time when she flinched, something like pain crossed his expression. You were safer not knowing. Happier. I was never happy, Zaraya whispered. I was just ignorant. Music drifted from the ballroom, something classical and beautiful, completely at odds with the conversation happening in this cold hallway. Ryu Suk's hand dropped, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. What do you want to do, Zaraya? Run. I'll let you. No more tutoring, no more bodyguards. You can finish your degree in peace. And the video. The scholarship. Destroyed and secured. You were always going to be fine. His smile was bitter. I just couldn't let you go. She should run. Should take the exit he was offering and never look back. But standing in that hallway, watching the most dangerous man she'd ever met look at her like she held his entire world in her hands, Zaraya realized the trap had closed completely. She'd seen his world. She couldn't unsee it. And some twisted part of her didn't want to. Don't blink. Subscribe, comment your country. Then watch what happens next. You're not ready. The video arrived in Zaraya's email 3 days after the gala. No subject line, no message. Just a single attachment and a timestamp showing it had been sent at 3:47 a.m. The hour when ghosts walked and desperate men made irreversible decisions. She didn't open it right away. Sat in her apartment with her laptop closed, coffee going cold beside her, trying to decide if she wanted to know what Ryu Suk considered important enough to send in the darkest part of the night. Finally, she clicked. The footage was grainy, security camera quality, showing the hallway outside his lecture hall. There she was, or someone who looked like her, slipping out of class 20 minutes in. The video that had started everything, the fabricated evidence that had forced her into tutoring sessions and opened the door to a world she'd never asked to enter. But this version was different. This version kept playing. Zaraya watched her doppelganger walk down the hallway, then stop, flicker, distort. The image glitched, revealing the editing software's interface beneath, the careful manipulation of timestamps and facial mapping. Then the video cut to raw footage, the real footage, showing Zaraya sitting in class the entire time, never leaving, while somewhere in a basement or backroom, someone carefully constructed a lie. The email notification came as she was watching it for the third time. Asterisk, the original has been deleted from all systems. This copy is yours to keep or destroy. You're free, Zaraya. You always were. Asterisk. I'm sorry it took me this long to let you go. R. She stared at the message until the screen blurred, then grabbed her keys. The drive to his estate took 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. His gate was open. Had he known she'd come? Or had he simply stopped caring about security now that he'd released his last hold on her? She found him in his study, sitting in darkness except for the city lights filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. He didn't turn when she entered, just kept staring at something she couldn't see. You came, he said quietly. I wasn't sure you would. You deleted it. Zaraya stayed in the doorway, maintaining distance. The video. The leverage. Everything. It was always going to be deleted. I just needed. He stopped, his shoulders rising and falling with a breath that sounded like defeat. I needed time to convince myself I could let you walk away. And can you? His laugh was hollow. No. But I'm going to anyway. Zariah moved into the room, her footsteps silent on expensive carpet. Why did you send it at 3 in the morning? Because that's when I finally accepted the truth. He turned then, and the moonlight caught his face, revealing exhaustion carved into every line. You're not Minji. You were never Minji. And I've been so desperate to resurrect someone I lost that I nearly destroyed someone I... He stopped, the unfinished sentence hanging between them like a confession he couldn't complete. Someone you what? Someone I could have loved for who she actually is, if I'd given myself the chance. His voice was raw, stripped of all the control and calculation she'd come to expect. But I didn't. I trapped you and manipulated you and dragged you into a world where people disappear for crossing me. All because you fell asleep in my classroom and for 3 seconds I thought I'd been given a miracle I didn't deserve. Zariah's throat tightened. She should be angry. Should take the freedom he was offering and run until her legs gave out. But watching him sit in his expensive study, surrounded by wealth and power that couldn't save the girl he'd loved or change the man he'd become, all she felt was an aching understanding of what it meant to be haunted. What if I don't want to go? The words escaped before she could stop them. He went very still. Don't say that unless you mean it. I'm not saying I forgive you. I'm not saying what you did was okay. She moved closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. But I've spent 3 days thinking about that woman at the gala, about your enemies, about the world you live in. And I keep coming back to one thing. What's that? When you look at me now, right now, in this moment, you're not seeing her anymore. You're seeing me. Zariah stopped in front of his chair, close enough to see the war playing out in his expression. And maybe I'm crazy, maybe this whole situation has broken something in me, but I think I'm the only person who's seen the parts of you that aren't the dragon or the professor or the mafia boss. Just a man who loved someone so much that losing her turned him into someone he never wanted to be. Ryu Suk stood slowly, and the air between them felt electric, dangerous, charged with possibilities that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. If you stay, Zariah, there's no going back. My world doesn't offer exits. My enemies don't forget faces. And his hand rose to her cheek, trembling slightly. I don't know if I can be what you deserve. Maybe I don't want what I deserve, she whispered. Maybe I want what I choose. For a long moment, they stood in the darkness, the city sprawling below them. 2 people balanced on the edge of a decision that would change everything or destroy them both. Then Zariah's phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. She pulled it out, her blood going cold as she read the messages. Unknown. Pretty dress at the gala. Unknown. Even prettier when you followed the dragon into that hallway. Asterisk unknown. We've been waiting for him to choose someone worth taking. Thank you for making this easy. Asterisk. The attached photo showed her outside Ryu Suk's estate. Tonight. 20 minutes ago. She looked up at him, watching his expression shift from vulnerability to something arctic and lethal as he read over her shoulder. Get away from the window, he said, his voice transformed back into the dragon's. Now. But before either of them could move, the lights of the estate went dark, plunging them into complete blackness, and somewhere in the distance, glass shattered. Zariah's hand found Ryu Suk's in the dark, gripping tight, and she realized with crystalline clarity that her choice had already been made the moment she'd driven through his open gate. Now they just had to survive it. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Zariah's voice sink back beneath the whispers of the Mafia world. When you click that button, you stand with every quiet fighter, every unseen student, and every woman who chose her truth over a powerful man's pride. Please subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.